The whisper was colder than the recycled, vaguely metallic air of the service van. A sterile hiss of processed sound that seemed to scrape directly against the delicate bones of Reza's inner ear. It was a ghost's voice, a string of algorithmically compressed data packets born in the digital ether of a Tel Aviv server farm. It had traveled an impossible journey, bounced across 2,000 kilometers of hostile deserts and sun-scorched mountains through a constellation of unseen, low-orbit satellites, and finally reconstituted as a disembodied command inside his head. The flesh-colored transducer, a marvel of bio-integrated miniaturization tucked so deep in his ear canal that it felt like a permanent itching part of him, was its final, intimate destination. Phase 3 initiated. The package is live. You are the delivery man. Acknowledge. Reza's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, syncopated drumbeat against the roaring silence of the early Isfahan morning. He was parked in a dusty, sun-bleached alley that ran behind a row of nondescript commercial buildings, the kind of forgotten urban artery that smelled perpetually of leaking garbage bins, feral cats, and the faint, bitter tang of cheap, hand-rolled tobacco. The early sun, already a merciless white disk in the hazy ochre sky, was baking the steel shell of his Peugeot partner van, turning the cramped cabin into a convection oven. Through the grimy windshield, streaked with the ghostly outlines of where the worn wipers couldn't reach, he could see the back of a small, family-run bakery. The scent of baking Barbary bread, a comforting yeast and sesame aroma from his childhood, mingled with the sharp, acrid perfume of diesel fumes from a passing truck. Normal smells. Deceptively, terrifyingly normal. His hands, slick with a film of cold sweat, were clenched around the worn plastic steering wheel, the vinyl slick and hot beneath his palms. His knuckles stood out as white peaks in a landscape of tanned, work-roughened skin. His throat was a desert, each swallow a painful, rasping effort. He reached up with a hand that trembled almost imperceptibly and tapped the right arm of his generic, black-framed glasses twice, a precise, rehearsed gesture. A tiny vibration, a subsonic pulse he felt more in his jawbone than heard, pulsed against his temple, confirming the signal was received. The ghost in his ear fell silent, leaving a void that was somehow more menacing than its presence, a vacuum filled only by the frantic thumping of his own blood. The package. He risked a glance in the rearview mirror, his eyes darting to the cargo space behind the wire mesh partition. It was a brand new, top-of-the-line Haier split-system air conditioning compressor unit, model H24B. Still gleaming in its cardboard and styrofoam sarcophagus, it looked utterly innocuous. A heavy, mundane piece of commercial equipment destined for a sweltering server room, the kind of thing he had installed hundreds of times over his 20-year career. But its benign appearance was a meticulously crafted lie, a masterpiece of deception. Inside its copper coils and insulated chassis, nestled beside the capacitor and the fan motor in a space that should have held sound-dampening foam, was a work of destructive art. It wasn't a bomb in the conventional sense. There was no C4, no Semtex, no volatile chemical signature that a trained dog with $1 million nose or a sensitive electronic sniffer could ever detect. It was something far more insidious, something born from the blackest budgets of Israel's defense laboratories. 2 kilograms of a classified thermobaric gel, a viscous, putty-like substance designated Helio-7, chemically engineered to look, feel, and even smell like common acoustic dampening putty. The detonator assembly was a triumph of microengineering, no larger than a thumbnail, and so intricately shielded with layered wafers of bismuth and lead-impregnated ceramic that it appeared on any X-ray or magnetic resonance scan as a standard, off-the-shelf voltage regulator. The device was designed not to explode outwards with shrapnel and concussive force, but inwards with pure, focused energy, fire, and pressure. Upon detonation, it would create a contained supernova. For precisely 1.3 seconds, the reinforced concrete room it occupied would become a blast furnace, reaching temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to turn steel to liquid and sand to glass. The sudden, catastrophic pressure wave, contained by the bunker's own walls, would turn concrete to dust and vaporize anything organic. It would erase paper, melt silicon, and cook human flesh to the bone before the nervous system could even register the agony. It was the ultimate sterilization tool, a weapon designed not just to kill, but to erase a place and its occupants from physical existence, leaving behind only scorched walls and unanswerable questions. And he, Reza Gorbani, a 48-year-old HVAC technician with a business teetering on the edge of bankruptcy and a grief that had hollowed out his soul like a terminal disease, was the delivery man. His fingers, fumbling in the pocket of his coveralls, found the worn, softened edges of a small laminated photograph. His daughter, Layla. Her smile, frozen in time from her last birthday, her eyes full of a fierce, intelligent light that the regime had extinguished. That smile was both his fuel and his eternal torment. Miles away, in a windowless room buried 3 stories beneath the concrete and steel of the Kiryat military headquarters in Tel Aviv, Eitan watched the world through the cold, unblinking eyes of his monitors. The room, known unofficially as the orchestra pit, was kept at a constant meat locker chill of 18 degrees Celsius and smelled of ozone from the humming server racks, stale coffee, and the faint, ever-present tension of men playing God. Eitan, the mission controller, was the conductor of this silent, global symphony of death. One screen, a massive 8K display, showed a live feed from a Heron TP high-altitude surveillance drone circling invisibly 40,000 feet above Isfahan. It was a grainy, heat-signature view of the world. The alley was a canyon of cool blues and grays, but the Peugeot partner van was a pale, rectangular blob, its engine block glowing a faint but distinct orange. Reza, if he stepped out, would be a flickering white silhouette against the cooler gray of the pavement. Another screen, smaller and to his left, displayed Reza's vitals. Relayed from a biometric sensor no larger than a grain of rice woven into the cotton collar of his work shirt. Heart rate, 132 beats per minute. Respiration, 24 breaths per minute, shallow and rapid. Skin conductivity, high. The man was terrified. Eitan made a dispassionate mental note. Fear was a tool. Properly managed, it kept an asset sharp. Unchecked, it made him sloppy. Complacency, however, was the real enemy. Complacency was what got you killed. A third, larger screen dominated the center of his console, displaying a detailed schematic of the target building, the Parsa Logistics Regional Headquarters. It was a bland, 4-story office block on the city's industrial fringe, an architectural monument to bureaucratic apathy. The relentless export of Iran's particular brand of chaos. And deep in the sub-basement of that building, in a signals-proof, reinforced command bunker shielded by 3 feet of steel-reinforced concrete, sat its commander, Major General Ali Fazlani. To the west, he was a name on a sanctions list, a shadowy figure in intelligence reports. To Eitan, he was a ghost who had haunted his career for a decade. The butcher of Beirut, the architect of Damascus, a man whose hands were stained with the blood of Eitan's colleagues, of civilians, of hope itself. Fazlani had personally overseen the operation that killed Yossi, Eitan's mentor and friend, in a meticulously planned car bombing in Limassol 6 years ago. Eitan could still remember the smell of the burning wreckage, the taste of cordite and ash in the humid Cyprus air. This was not just a mission. It was a reckoning. Intercepted chatter, painstakingly decrypted by a listening post on a desolate mountain in Azerbaijan, spoke of Fazlani planning something new, something on a scale they hadn't seen before. A multi-city attack in Europe, timed for the upcoming Christmas holidays, designed for maximum civilian casualties. Fazlani was the brain. The command bunker was the central nervous system. The mission, codenamed Sterile Echo, was brutally simple: decapitate the snake and burn its nest. He's about to move. As far as they're concerned, he's just a technician responding to an urgent fault. It had been Kobe's team that had created the fault in the first place. 2 nights ago, a Mossad cyber warfare unit had used a blacked-out OFEC-16 reconnaissance satellite to beam a focused, high-energy radio frequency pulse at the Parsa Logistics building. The pulse, a tight beam of microwaves at exactly 12.75 gigahertz, was tuned to the specific resonant frequency of the compressor motor in the air conditioning unit that cooled the sub-basement server room, a room which sat directly above Fazlani's command bunker. The motor's copper windings had fused instantly, a silent, invisible act of sabotage from orbit. For 2 days, the server room's temperature had been climbing, threatening a catastrophic hardware failure. The Iranians had, as predicted, called the original installer, a reputable Isfahan firm, a firm that had, for the last 6 years, been a carefully cultivated Mossad asset, its owner indebted to them for his son's life-saving cancer treatment in a German hospital. And the firm had, as instructed, dispatched their best, most trusted senior technician, Reza Gorbani, a man whose hatred for the regime burned hotter than any thermobaric device. Eitan leaned forward, his eyes locked on the drone feed. "Talk to me, Reza," he murmured to the screen, as if the man could hear him across the desert and the mountains, a secular prayer to an agent in the field. "Walk us through it. For Layla." In the stifling heat of the van, Reza took a final, shuddering breath and killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the frantic thumping in his chest. He opened the door and stepped out into the oppressive heat, the sun hitting him like a physical blow. He was wearing the standard blue coveralls of his company, Isfahan Climate Solutions, the logo stitched neatly over his heart. He looked the part. He was the part. That was the terrible beauty of the plan, the cold elegance of the Saisan system, using local assets, disillusioned citizens, to do the work that no Israeli agent with a foreign accent and the wrong color eyes ever could. Reza was invisible. He was just another face in the crowd, a working man trying to get through his day. He walked to the back of the van, his movements deliberately slow and methodical. The practiced economy of motion of a man who has performed the same task 10,000 times. He slid open the heavy side door with a familiar groan of metal on metal. The AC unit sat there, waiting. He picked up his clipboard, the forged work order clipped to the top. Everything was perfect. The serial numbers matched the ones Eitan's team had entered into the contractor's database. The job description was precise. Replace faulty compressor unit, model H24B, for sub-basement server room. Urgent. System failure imminent. He slid the heavy unit onto a dolly, the small wheels groaning under the weight. 90 kilograms of machinery and death. He began the long, lonely walk towards the building's service entrance, the dolly's wheels rattling on the cracked pavement. Each rattle was a jolt to his frayed nerves, a potential alarm. He could feel the eyes of the guards at the gate on him long before he saw them. Two young IRGC soldiers, no older than Layla would have been, their faces impassive and shadowed by the brims of their caps. They cradled their Kalashnikovs, older AKM variants, judging by the milled receivers and laminated wood furniture. Not with the alert readiness of soldiers in a war zone, but with the bored familiarity of men guarding an office building. That boredom was his shield. The ghost voice returned in his ear. Aitan's voice now, impossibly calm and measured, a lifeline of pure logic in a sea of fear. They will check your paperwork. They will check your ID. They will not check the machine. They have been conditioned to see it as equipment, not a threat. Your profile is clean. You are expected. Breathe, Reza. In for 4, hold for 2, out for 6. Control the body, and you control the mind. Reza did as he was told, forcing the hot, dusty air into his lungs, feeling it burn, then slowly releasing it. The lead guard, a boy with angry acne scars, mapping his cheeks, and a wispy mustache he was clearly proud of, held out a hand for the clipboard. His eyes, dark and empty, scanned the Farsi script. He grunted, then took Reza's national ID card, comparing the grim-faced photo to the sweating, pale man standing before him. Reza felt a single bead of sweat break free from his hairline and trickle down his temple, a tiny, cold river of fear. The guard's eyes were like black stones. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, the guard just stared, his gaze lingering, searching for something he couldn't name. He could be seeing anything. A flicker of fear, a hint of deception, the subtle tension in Reza's jaw. Then, with a curt nod that broke the spell, he handed the clipboard and ID back. The service elevator is to the left. Sergeant Mortazi will escort you from there. Relief, so potent it was almost nauseating, washed over Reza. He had passed the first test. He pushed the dolly through the gate, the second guard waving him on without a glance, already lost in a conversation about a football match with his colleague. He was inside the belly of the beast. The air in the service corridor was cool and smelled of industrial disinfectant and floor wax. A burly man with a thick black mustache and the insignia of an IRGC sergeant on his collar was waiting for him by a steel door. Mortazi. He had a face like a clenched fist and the bored, brutish air of a career bully who enjoyed his small kingdom of corridors and keycards. "You are the technician?" Mortazi's voice was a low growl, thick with suspicion. "Yes, Sergeant. For the server room AC." Reza replied, his own voice sounding surprisingly steady. He had rehearsed this 1,000 times in his mind, but the reality of this man, this uniform, the symbol of the very power that had murdered his daughter, was a different kind of pressure. Mortazi grunted again, a sound of profound dissatisfaction. "This way, and no detours. You do your work, you get out." He turned and led the way down the corridor, his heavy boots echoing on the polished concrete. Reza followed, pushing the dolly. The machine felt impossibly heavy now, its secret contents a lead weight on his conscience. He touched the pocket with Layla's photo, the laminated edges a familiar comfort. "For you," he thought, a silent vow. "They called you a traitor for wanting freedom. I will show them what a real traitor can do." They had killed her for handing out pamphlets during a student protest at the university. A single bullet to the chest from a Basiji thug on a motorcycle. They refused to return her body, burying her in an unmarked mass grave to make an example of her. That was the day the old Reza died, and this new one, this hollowed-out instrument of vengeance, was born. They reached a heavy steel door, marked with a high-voltage symbol and the Farsi words for authorized personnel only. Mortazi unlocked it with a keycard and a thump of his thumb on a biometric scanner. Server room. The old unit is on the wall mount. Disconnect it. Take it with you. Install the new one. I will be right outside this door. You have 90 minutes. I may need to access the main breaker panel in the corridor, Reza said, reciting the line Eitan had drilled into him. It was a crucial part of the plan. Mortazi scowled, his thick eyebrows knitting together. The panel is secured. Why? To safely cut the power before I disconnect the high-voltage lines. It's a 380-volt, three-phase connection. Standard procedure. Safety regulations. Reza held his gaze, channeling every ounce of his 20 years of professional experience, praying the technical jargon and the appeal to mundane bureaucracy would work. The sergeant considered this for a moment, his eyes narrowing, then gave a curt, reluctant nod. Fine. When you are ready, knock. I will open it for you. Do not touch anything else. He stepped back, and Reza pushed the dolly into the room. The door hissed shut behind him, the magnetic lock engaging with a heavy, final thud. He was alone. The room was small, a claustrophobic space filled with floor-to-ceiling racks of humming servers, their blinking green and amber lights casting an eerie glow on the metal walls. A blast of hot, stale air, smelling of overheated plastic and ozone, hit him. The dead AC unit was on the far wall, a silent metal box. A thick bundle of armored cables ran from the server racks through a reinforced conduit in the floor, down to the command bunker below. The heart of Unit 840. The ghost voice was back. You are in. Vitals are elevated but stable. You have 88 minutes remaining on the clock. Begin diagnostics. We need to make this look real for the camera. Reza's eyes flicked to the corner of the ceiling. A tiny, black dome. A security camera. He nodded to himself, put on his tool belt, and got to work. He opened his toolbox, a standard-issue steel case. But like the AC unit, it was a Trojan horse. The top tray held wrenches, screwdrivers, and wire strippers. But beneath a false bottom lay the tools of a different trade. A fiber optic scope no thicker than a wire, a pocket-sized frequency scanner, and a small, powerful magnetic device, dark and non-reflective, known as a parasite. He spent 20 agonizing minutes performing a pantomime of diagnostics on the old unit. He attached a multimeter to its terminals, frowned at the non-existent readings, and made meticulous notes on his clipboard. He tapped the compressor housing with the handle of a screwdriver, all for the benefit of the unblinking eye in the ceiling. He had to be the bored, competent technician. He had to sell the part. Eitan, he whispered, his lips barely moving, his back to the camera. I can hear them, through the floor. Muffled voices. A man is shouting. In Tel Aviv. Eitan's eyes narrowed. Confirmed. The bunker is active. Fazlani is present. We are picking up faint RF leakage from their comms. He's running a briefing. Kobe's fingers flew across his keyboard, decoding the faint electronic whispers that bled through the concrete. Audio is too garbled to translate, but the cadence matches Fazlani's from prior recordings. Facial recognition from a social media scrape confirms 2 of his key deputies are also with him. The whole leadership is in the pot. Reza. Eitan's voice was sharp in his ear, cutting through his concentration. It is time. Request access to the breaker panel, now. Reza took a breath and knocked on the steel door. It opened a moment later, Mortazi's sour face filling the gap. I need to cut the power now, Sergeant. Mortazi grunted and led him to a large gray metal cabinet on the corridor wall. He swiped his keycard, and the cabinet clicked open, revealing a complex, intimidating array of circuit breakers and switches. "Server room is this one," he said, pointing to a large red switch labeled with a lightning bolt symbol. "Do not touch anything else." He stood back, arms crossed, his shadow falling over Reza, watching his every move. This was the most dangerous moment. A single suspicious glance, a wrong move, and it was all over. Reza's hands, slick with sweat, reached for the switch, his thumb pressed down. With a loud, echoing clack, the power to the server room was cut. The humming of the servers inside died, replaced by the high-pitched whine of their uninterruptible power supply backups. But Reza's work wasn't with the switch. His left hand, hidden from Mortazi's direct line of sight by the angle of his own body, moved with practice speed. In his palm was the parasite tap. He reached deep into the cabinet, his fingers finding the thick, insulated cable that fed power down to the command bunker. He pressed the device against it. Two microscopic, diamond-hard needles, invisible to the naked eye, pierced the thick insulation, making perfect contact with the copper core. The parasite was a listening device, but it was also a receiver. It would act as the secondary antenna for the detonation signal, bypassing any jamming equipment in the bunker. He held it in place for 3 seconds. A faint green light, invisible to Mortazi from his angle, blinked once and went dark. The connection was made. He withdrew his hand, his heart pounding a deafening rhythm in his ears. "Thank you, Sergeant," he said, his voice tight but even. He walked back into the server room, and Mortazi locked the door behind him once more. The voice in his ear was electric with tension. "The parasite is active. We have a direct, hard-line link. Well done, Reza. Now, mount the package. 40 minutes remain." The next phase was pure physical labor, a welcome, mind-numbing distraction. He disconnected the old, dead unit, wrestling its 90 kilograms of dead weight off the wall mount. He grunted with the effort, the sweat stinging his eyes. He moved it to the side, then unpacked the new unit. It slid from its box, cold, perfect, and malevolent. He lifted it, muscles in his back and arms straining, and maneuvered it onto the wall mount. The brackets clicked into place with a sound of chilling finality. It was a perfect fit. Now for the connections. This was the delicate part. He had to connect the power, the coolant lines, and the thermostat controls. But there was one extra secret connection to make. A tiny, hair-thin fiber optic cable spooled inside the unit's chassis. He uncoiled it carefully. This was the primary detonator link. He used a dental mirror to look at the underside of the main server rack conduit, the one that went down through the floor. There, placed by a previous asset months ago during the building's construction, was a tiny magnetic port, disguised as a standard hex bolt head. He had to connect the fiber optic line to that port. It was a blind connection, working by feel in a space barely big enough